Hello pot stickers. If you're looking for recipes to use your washed flour seitan that I've been showing you on this channel, how about lemon tarragon chicken shepherd's pot pie, but vegan? Making a lemon tarragon chicken filling with my seitan, that's kind of like you would find in the pot pie, but without a pastry crust. Instead, I'm gonna top it with the most amazing, delicious, creamy mashed potatoes and make it into a shepherd's pie. Shepherd's pot pie. This dish turned out absolutely amazing and I'm gonna show it to you right now. Let's start with the potatoes. You really can use any kind of potato you want, but I love to use a yellow potato like a Yukon Gold or other variety because they tend to be creamy and really, really delicious. For this recipe today, I'm using 5 medium-sized yellow potatoes. Here you can see that I'm peeling off the skins. If you want to leave the skins on, you can, but for this, I prefer to peel the skins. I'm cutting these up into quarters and throwing them into a pot with a healthy amount of salt. Add just enough cold water to cover the potatoes and set it on the stove. Heat this to a boil and simmer your potatoes for about 15 to 20 minutes. What you are looking for is for these potatoes to be fork tender and fall apart easily. You want to drain off the water. To the hot steaming potatoes, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of vegan butter, a few grinds of black pepper, and about a cup of plant-based milk. Since I use salt in my boiling water, I'm going to wait to season this with more salt until later. Mash that all up with a potato masher. If your potatoes are still a little bit too dry, add a bit more plant milk. In total, I needed about a half cup more to get the texture where it is soft and light, just the way I like it. Give it a taste and check for seasoning. I added another pinch of salt and these are ready. Set them aside until you're ready to assemble your pie. Now for the filling, I'm starting with about 400 grams or about 14 ounces of prepared seitan chicken. This is the seitan after it's been fully simmered and then chilled in the fridge. If you haven't seen my video on how to make seitan from washing flour, make sure to watch that first. I'll put a link in the description below. Now you could shred this chicken, but I'm gonna cut this up into bite-sized cubes, like you would find in a pot pie. First, I'm slicing the seitan into strips, and then I'm gonna cut them crosswise. I'm also going to slice up 3 medium carrots. I'm using 1 yellow onion, and those are diced into small bite-sized pieces. 2 cloves of garlic are going into this, finely minced. I'm also going to use a good cup and a half of frozen peas. Here are all the main ingredients for the filling. In addition to this, I'm going to be using a little bit more butter, some flour to thicken it, some plant-based milk, and some fresh tarragon. I am fortunate to have a tarragon plant in my garden, so I'm using the leaves from a couple of large sprigs of tarragon. I just love tarragon and lemon together. The flavor combination is really incredible. This tarragon is going to get a rough chop. If you don't have fresh tarragon, you could use any other fresh herb. Parsley would be fine in this dish as well. Although tarragon is something special with the lemon, you could get away with just parsley. Or if you can find dried tarragon, go ahead and use that too. Now the first thing I'm going to do is cook these ingredients and make a sauce for this, kind of like a gravy, like you would find in a chicken pot pie. Since this is going to bake in the oven, it's not important that you get all of the vegetables completely cooked. You just want them to be slightly cooked, and I like them to be nicely softened for this. Now I'm going to make my whole pot pie in the same pan, and I'm using my enameled Dutch oven. If you want, you could use a baking dish or other dish also that you could assemble your pie in. Start by heating a tablespoon of olive oil and add in your onions and garlic. Saute those for a few minutes until they start to soften. I'm seasoning these with a pinch of salt and pepper, and you'll notice that I'm going to be seasoning all the way along my dish. Since I'm going to thicken the sauce with flour, I want to add some more fat to make sort of a roux with the flour I'm going to add. So I'm adding in an additional 3 tablespoons of vegan butter, so there's enough fat to balance that flour later. I'm tossing in my carrots next. Cook these down for a couple of minutes, and then add your seitan. Once everything gets heated through and is up to temperature, I'm adding 3 heaping tablespoons of flour. Again, I'm trying to make kind of a roux out of the flour and the fat. Just stir that around and cook it for a couple of minutes until the flour gets all incorporated. It's okay if the flour clumps up, and if there is a bit of browning on the pan, that's fine too. It's going to add more flavor. Just be careful you don't burn it. I'm deglazing the pan with about a half a cup or a little more of white wine. Actually, I'm using one that I make in my winery here in North Dakota. It has a nice crisp lemony sort of flavor. It's a cold climate grape called Frontenac Blanc. Any dry white wine with a crisp acidity will work well with this dish. Or you can just leave it out and deglaze with a bit of vegetable stock or even some water if you need to. After a minute or so, the alcohol is cooked off. Now it's time to add our creaminess in the form of a plant-based milk. Today I'm using macadamia nut milk because I like the creamy texture and flavor. If you have soy milk, that'll work. If you have cashew milk or almond milk, they'll all work perfectly here. I added just enough milk to sort of cover the ingredients ingredients, I would estimate it's about 1.5 cups. I didn't really measure it. If the sauce is too thick after it comes up to a simmer, you can always add a little more milk to thin it out. Stir this over the heat until it starts to thicken. Scrape up all the goodness from the bottom and mix it well. You want to taste it again for seasoning. I added a bit more pepper and another pinch of salt to balance this out. This is going to thicken up more in the oven, so you don't need the gravy to be completely stiff, but you do want it thickened so it's not soupy. Now comes the lemon. I'm adding about 1/2 cup of lemon juice. This is the juice from 2 good-sized lemons. Lastly, turn off the heat and add in your frozen peas and the chopped tarragon. They don't need to be cooked too much, as it's going to be heated thoroughly through when it's in the oven. As I said, I'm putting together my pie right here in the same pot, so I'm just going to clean up the sides of the pot a little bit. If you're going to use a different baking dish, go ahead and pour this filling out into the bottom of a baking dish for the next step. Next, you want to add your mashed potatoes. You want to be a little careful here so you don't just mix up those potatoes into the filling. I like to dollop small spoonfuls of the mashed potatoes across the entire surface of the dish so I don't have to push them around too much when smoothing the top. You want them to be a layer, not mixed in with the filling. Using a flat spatula, gently smooth out the potatoes to make your shepherd's pie top layer. If you want even more indulgence, you could add a few pats of vegan butter onto the top of those potatoes so that it would melt and form a crust, but I didn't do it this time. Place this into an oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 200 degrees Celsius. I baked my pie for about 45 minutes. The baking time is going to depend on the size and shape of the dish that you're using. If you have a wider and flatter dish, it'll likely cook faster than that. Check out it starting after about 25 minutes or so. You want it to be nice and bubbly and cooked through. If you can get the top to brown just slightly, that would be good too. You might see a little bit of that filling bubbling up and oozing out on top. It's okay, it's all gonna taste great. When it's done, take it out of the oven. You can see that some of my gravy has bubbled up around the sides and sort of formed on top, but that's okay. Let that cool down for about 10 minutes or so. The filling will set up. You should end up with a nice sauce that's not too soupy, but not too thick that it just holds together in a solid form. This tangy, lemony tarragon chicken shepherd's pot pie was one of the best things I've made in a long time. We devoured it. The potatoes were creamy and the filling was tart from that lemon, and you had this fresh herbs from the tarragon. If you didn't know better, you wouldn't be able to tell that this dish was vegan. The seitan had the perfect chicken-like texture, and because it was in cubes, it really felt like you were eating a chicken pot pie. I hope you try this recipe, because if you don't, you're really missing out. If you do make it, please come back and tell me how it turned out. I really want to know if you liked it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time as the pot thickens. Okay, blah, blah, blah. If you're looking for recipes to make with your washed flour seitan that I've shown